This is Group Las Vegas taking EDM 310 at the University of South Alabama, and our group members consist of me, Angela Garoni, Kevin Reese, Kelsey, and Nancy Dayhoff. Tonight we're going to be discussing the driving question that Dr. Strange gave us after we watched a series of videos, and his driving question was, what have we learned from these videos and the teachers that presented them? The first video that we're going to talk about is from a teacher who is teaching fourth grade students, and he happens to teach these fourth grade students for 3 consecutive years, which I thought was very interesting. So they start in fourth grade and they stay with him 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. His name is Brian Crosby, and he teaches at an inner city school. And he said that what was interesting to me was, he said the beginning of the year he gives a survey to his students, and in the survey he's asking these children questions like, what city do you live in, what country do you live in, what's your phone number, what state do you live in, and the majority of his children don't know. They're fourth graders and they don't know. He says that 90% of them are second language learners, so they're basically learning English as a second language, and they qualify for free lunches, so they're in poverty. And he says, while statistically you could look at that and say, okay, these kids don't know where they live, their phone numbers, their states, they don't know any of this information because they're transient. True in this case, because only I think 2 of the children in this particular class that he talks about met that criteria. The rest of them had been in this school since 1st grade. So with that being said, he starts the concept of, I think the question that he asks is, we have to teach students how to be learners, and not that learning is no longer sitting quietly in a seat and raising your hand when you want to know an answer. Instead, learning is an active process, and so that project began with asking the question about, what are the layers of the atmosphere, and went all the way to these children packing cameras, recording devices, DVDs that they had made about the atmosphere, because they had to pretend that they were the weather balloon and write a story about it and then post that on their blog. They had to do blogging it internationally with other students. They have other classes calling and saying, hey, or blogging to them saying, can we get our teacher to do this? Can you teach us? So he gets his kids together. Now, these are second language learning students living in poverty who don't even know their addresses, right? He gets these kids together. They are teaching other teachers in other classes how to do these projects. They're explaining it, they're communicating, they're having to problem solve. He really taught me that we can step outside of the box and teach kids. You don't have to be rich to have a rich curriculum.
I did, I watched the blended learning cycles, and it was Paul Anderson. He is a science teacher. He wants to change his classroom from passive to active. He says that teachers shouldn't be doing all the work anymore. The students should be doing all the work. And I found that very hilarious myself. He wanted to start a blended class, which I don't know if anybody knows, but a blended class is the online, mobile, as well as a classroom. And he put on there his version of a blended learning cycle. The most important thing is the driving question, of course, we knew about. And he says after that they have an investigation, they do a video, they do an elaboration, a review, and then after they're done with all that, they do a summary quiz. He says it is good for them, it is engaging, they're exploring, explaining, and expanding.
So his class is like our class, the blended class.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. And in the beginning of it, he shows a picture of, like, somebody had drawn 1950 something of what they thought the year 2000 class would look like. And it was like of kids that had headphones over their ears hanging from like they were all hooked to the same wire in the roof, and books were being fed into a machine that was going into their earphones that they had over their ears. It was really funny. And he said, my class doesn't look like this, but it looks very different than it did that a classroom would look in the 1960s or 1950s, whatever that was.
Yeah, the strange thing about that one, they
They,
actually had they had the earpieces and stuff coming from the ceiling instead of coming
yeah, it was
from
like from the
somewhere else.
ceiling, and they were
But it
all
was the
hooked to
same
the same
concept
thing.
that they were envisioning already. But what I'm going to comment on is basically Sam Payne. He teaches a fourth grade class, and basically it's talking about the name of the video is Super Digital Citizen. Uh, you take away from it all of the good things about collaborative learning, project-based learning type of scenarios. And for them, they were making video of themselves implanted inside of one of the digital comics. And so basically you see them in there, they're very motivated, they're enthusiastic, everybody's engaged, and they are seriously, I mean, you don't see one bored child the whole time. And biggest thing I can take away from that video is that when you introduce kids to the project-based learning type of teaching, you capture their attention, you get them involved, they enjoy being involved, and it's one of, like I said, I don't know how I could even think of teaching any other way, willing to come to school. I mean, you hardly ever see a class empty with these kids. I imagine they come to school sick all the time because that's what that type of atmosphere is doing for them. And when you have something like, a comic involved, you're taking that mentality of a child and saying, hey, I want to play with this. But they were doing technically uh, high using technically high investigative tools to get the whole project done. And they were using not just one standard, they were using a whole lot of standards. The other video that I watched, basically it was Dean Shareski. He's a big, supporter of project-based learning, and that was actually the name of the video, project-based learning. And basically, he encourages us to explore non-segmental type of instruction for our kids, which means that if you're going to segregate by, teaching English skills one day and then teaching mathematics skills the other day, you're not allowing them to desegregate, in his words, everything that's there, which means pull it all together. Give them a basis where they're not thinking about, I got to get a grade, I gotta learn English tomorrow. They're just straight engaged in what they're learning. And for me, it was very knowledgeable finding the amount of feedback that they get, and they get feedback from everywhere. The video, which was only about 2 minutes and 30 seconds or so long, it was the name of it was Making Thinking Visible. It was basically talking about what you can learn about working in groups. So that was the whole basis of that particular video. It was, get your kids to working and watch them go. You don't need to do anything else after that. They're going to take over after you take a minute and a half and not 45 minutes lecturing to them, and you're going to hear, and they go.
And Kevin, my video was also project-based learning. Mine was about a school, Roosevelt Elementary School. They have been doing project-based learning in their classrooms for years. So this has been a tried, it's a tested and proved system there already. This particular video interviews parents, it interviews students, it interviews teachers, and everybody was very excited about what they're doing at Roosevelt. The parents really felt the excitement from their kids when they came home. They like you said, they didn't really want to miss school. They would go, even if they didn't feel the best, because it was exciting. It was fun. They were doing things. They were active. um, some of the things they, they were the teachers, and then they would talk about the state standards, what state standards should cover. Also, and some of the standards that they covered were cooperative learning, cooperative groups working together, communicating together, using language. He talked about in the video. Um, they're taught to work on a project from beginning to end. They are exposed to public speaking leaders because they do project presentations. So by the time the students are older, they are more comfortable with public presentations. The teachers talked about the flexibility within the project that allows them to stretch the project out if they want to, so that there could be more room for greater learning. Curriculum integration is something else they talked about, where you could put all sorts of disciplines together. And I think Kevin mentioned this a little bit, where you had writing and reading and researching and doing experiments, and you did math. All of these things were together covered in one project. As a result of doing project-based learning, the students they're more engaged, they're more self-motivated, they interact with each other, they're not just being lectured to. I think you said that before as well. So I what I learned and what I took from these videos is, we've already covered project-based learning earlier in the semester, but what I really took from it was the excitement that's generated from the students. They really, they're motivated to do the project because they have ownership of it. Um, they feel the responsibility of the end result, and so they take the project more seriously. Um, and I think that can't necessarily be said about a lot of other homework projects. So project-based learning definitely gets these kids motivated and excited about the classroom.
And Nancy, I think that's the perfect summation of what we've all listened to and I think learned, is that this type of teaching, this type of empowering the students really does result in them being excited, taking ownership, and coming to school not because their parents are forcing them to, but because they really are excited about what they're going to learn. So